KnockBack, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to KnockBack. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother Dagan Reek Moriarty. Dagan, thank you for joining me today. How are you, my friend?
Not Theon Reek. Khaleesi.
Not, that's Marine. That's Slaver's Bay. That's my Baelish. That's my Baelish. The first one was my Jorah. The second one was my Littlefinger, although I don't know if that they're really indistinguishable from each other.
That's a good point. Yeah, I like that mashup. That's confusing.
Slaver's Bay. That's more like Littlefinger,
Bay.
right?
Yeah, but you know what? They kind of go hand in hand. You're absolutely right.
But then Jorah would be like, "That's Slaver's Bay," or it's really more, "That's Marine." You got to have that. Anyway, that's Slaver's Bay. That's more. Yeah, Littlefinger's a little
not
easier.
bad. You got a nice Peter Baelish going on over
Thanks.
there.
I'm trying. I just love the way he talks because it's so unnecessary.
It's so
Micah
funny.
and I keep comparing it to Downton Abbey with some of the acting in that, where it's just like over the top. You know, it's so good.
He made a choice.
Yeah,
it's consistent. Give him credit, right?
Definitely. Hugh Bonneville, of course, one of the main characters in Downton Abbey, is like a complete overactor. He's so great. Like you can always tell, like it's like scene, and then he's like on. You know?
Oh yeah.
He like turns around at the fireplace or whatever, and it's like scene.
He's wonderful.
How's it going? How's life? Anything to report before we begin our
It's
Game of Thrones
good.
adventure?
Yeah, I was just thinking about my dream because this is kind of an event for me. I don't remember my dreams very often. And then when I do remember one, as we've talked about on our dream episode many episodes ago, that was many moons ago. But when I do remember one, it's the most surreal, sort of nonsensical thing. So I had this dream. I don't know if it was last night or the night before. Very vivid in my mind when I woke up. I didn't even have to write it down or anything. It was just, it's kind of like this confluence of two different things that happened in the dream. So it starts out, I win a place in the Guinness Book of World Records for skateboarding.
Oh.
Now, apparently I had done the most back-to-back tricks of a specific trick without messing up, maybe 100 or 200 or something. Frontside heel flip for you skate rats out there. Good trick. And actually, the trick I could do back in my prime that I was pretty consistent at. It was kind of my stairs and gap flip trick, kind of a go-to for me. And I was always just really comfortable with it. So that was kind of funny. And then all of a sudden, I was whisked into this other secondary dream where I was in the downtown of a big city. It kind of looked like New York, the midtown of New York a little bit. And it was post-apocalyptic in the sense of not destruction, but there was like 3 feet of snow. And apparently the snow must have come out of nowhere because all the cars and everything was just abandoned. So there were like cars, think of the road, but without the nuclear destruction. Everybody just had their car, the doors open, left them out on the street. And I guess we're seeking shelter. There were no other humans in the dream. And I'm walking down the street, and it's kind of this vanilla sky, midtown hellscape of snow. And then all of a sudden, these giant snow boulders start raining down, like someone's trying to hit me with them from the top of the skyscrapers. And I'm like, what the hell? So I start running. And I notice a semi-truck, like an 18-wheeler that's abandoned there with the door to the cab open. So I jump in there, and now these giant snow and ice boulders are hitting the truck, and I'm sort of ducking for cover. And I'm thinking in my head, like, if these things hit me, it could be the size of like a regular snowball, but if they hit me from this height, I'm dead. It's like getting hit with a safe, right? Or a piano or something.
Right. Terminal velocity.
Then I don't know what's going on. And then all of a sudden I realize that there's people on top of these buildings trying to, or attacking me with these snowballs. It turns out to be this Running Man type game show. So now I have this kind of Street League meets Running Man dream going on.
Smash
and
TV.
It started to get upsetting because, you know, when a dream just kind of turns and then you're like, you kind of realize you're in a dream, but you don't want to see what happens if you get hit by one of these things, you know, dying within a dream and all that kind of stuff. So there was a moment of time where I knew it was a dream, but I kind of stayed in it. And then I just sort of woke myself up because it was getting a little too hairy and a little too seedy.
Right.
Get a little too scared.
In the words of Uncle John.
In the immortal words of Uncle John. But I thought it was so interesting. And it's one of those dreams that even when I'm describing it to you guys, it was so vivid. Like I could feel the temperature. I could hear how quiet it was. And that was kind of an eerie thing when you have the big city, but it's just like this pervading quiet. It was really neat. I really enjoy remembering my dreams. It's such a treat because it's very rare that I remember them. And I think because my dreams are so confusing that I kind of lose the thread. And then, one thing just leads to the next. And then it just becomes this conglomeration of like ridiculousness. And it was vivid for me. It actually had a setting. It wasn't just some sort of blank canvas in the background like my dreams often are. So I was excited about it.
Well, I'm glad. You should write these down in a dream notebook.
What do you think it means?
I don't know. I don't even dare to go down that road.
I know.
Because I'm not so sure dreams mean anything, but then I feel like they must mean something. And I've said before, like I have just the same dream over and over again, basically. It's the same type of dream where I'm just urgently trying to go or get somewhere and can never go or get to where I'm going in time. Right. That happens every day, basically.
That's so funny.
And just different settings, different places, different scenarios, different people. Always trying to get through a hotel, trying to get into a train, trying to get to a plane, and it's always just not happening. It's
always
very
the
weird.
Same idea.
So I feel like either I'm nuts, which it could be, or it must mean something. Like there must be more to it. But
you got to dream something, right? Your mind's kind of sitting there. Your unconscious is just kind of whirling.
I think there's a lot more than we know.
I wish we could kind of crack that.
Like
I think just a little bit.
Your brain's regenerating. There is like everyone knows, like when you're asleep, you're out. No one can really explain it. You're gone though. And so I think there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. I think it's an exciting course of scientific inquiry. A lot of interesting podcasts about it and all the rest.
Absolutely.
A lot of different theories.
What's going on with you, my friend? How you been?
I'm fine. I just thought I'd briefly share this funny anecdote, which is, when you meet a person, it could be like an individual, like a neighbor or whatever, or someone at a store, like someone, and you want this person to like you, right?
Sure.
Have like a good impression of you.
Sure.
And then you kind of realize that you failed in delivering that, but very Larry David-esque thing. So I was just thinking, we went to the pool store today. We have this pool store that we go to like check our water.
Okay.
The guy's really nice. Like,
you bring a sample with you to the place?
Yeah, you bring a sample. This is the thing that they do now. You bring a sample, and then they tell you specifically what you need, and then they sell you all the different items, like the shock and all that.
Yeah, right.
And so we went like maybe almost a month ago, and I thought I was like prepared, but I wasn't prepared because like I went into this place, I had my water, but then the guy like started asking me questions, and in thinking back, it's like, why don't I know this, and why did I think I didn't need to know this information? So he was like, "How big's your pool?" And I'm like, "Well, it's like 32 by 16, 6 feet tall." Yeah, he's like, "How many gallons?"
Oh.
I'm like. Is that important? Like, and he's like, yes, obviously it's important. Now, for some reason in my mind, I was like, no, they'll tell you like just what's going on with your water, which they wouldn't need to know anything about the size of the pool. They can just kind of say it, but like to fix the problems, they will need to know how big your water is. And I don't know why I didn't think of this. So
makes sense.
We kind of like guessed. And then like I went up and, the other thing was that we have like a salt pool. Like the big thing now is like putting salt in your pool, right?
Sure.
Now, I don't know anything. Well, I don't want to say I don't know anything about chemistry, but I was never thinking about it as like, oh, salt is just making chlorine, asshole. So
okay.
I was like, yeah, I have like a salt pool as opposed to a chlorine pool. And he's like, oh, well, it's like the same thing, he's saying that, but he's like, it's the same thing. Like and he was explaining all these things to me. So I'm like, all right, first of all, I didn't know like the gallonage. I like this guy. I didn't know the gallonage of my pool. He thinks I'm a fucking idiot. Then I don't realize that like salt and chlorine are like to the same end. I just thought it was like a different kind of situation. And then he gave us all of these instructions to put the things in the pool, the various things we needed, and we did. But then, thank God Micah was there listening, because I was confused. I was like asking a bunch of questions. Like, yeah, like it says it here, like as I said here, and this and so on and so forth. So I don't think I made a great impression on this guy. Very nice guy, but in my mind, I'm like, this guy probably thinks I'm a fucking idiot, right? But then I went in today.
Yeah.
And he recognized us. He asked us how the pool was going. He's very nice to us.
Okay.
And we got everything we needed. And we left. And I was like, maybe I didn't leave as a bad of impression. Like, we're back on the mend with this guy, this random man who doesn't think about me at all, which is the best part about it. So you won him
over despite your poor performance.
I hope so.
The first time.
Right. So I was
You
just
had
thinking
to
about that
say
today.
though. You had to say like it's new. I'm a new pool owner. Make an
Well, I also had to
excuse.
say to him, 'cause I was like, the people that built my pool are derelict, right? Like, I don't know anything about it. It works. We had like some other company come over and they looked and like, yeah, it's totally fine. But like,
Okay.
no one explained how to clean it. No one explained how to use like the sand. We have like a 300-pound like sand filter and stuff like that. And you have to like, there's
Yeah,
like
are they
crazy shit you
supposed
have
to
to
do
it.
that? Like walk you through everything?
Yeah, and they just never
would
did. So
imagine.
the guy was like, but then the guy was like, I would have more to say, but except for I hear it all the time or whatever. Like, Jesus Christ. So maybe it was
that company or just in general.
just in general, I guess, that they like everyone we've ever talked about with pools, like any person is like, oh man, like I don't know, I didn't know
I'm
that.
sorry.
I just didn't know that. Like everyone was like, dude, like every time I bring up, they're like, yeah, dude, 2 years, 3 years, just complete calamities, right? Like, and I'm like, oh, maybe I actually dodged a bullet, but nonetheless, I just thought that was funny because I was just thinking about that guy. And I'm like, I want this guy. Maybe we'll have like a relationship with this guy over the years, and I want him to like me.
Sure.
I don't believe first impressions are unbreakable. I'm not one of those people that thinks like first impressions are everything, but they're important.
Sure. Oh yeah.
And so it's like I gotta start throwing in some more sophisticated vocabulary. I gotta start maybe bringing up something like, have you seen the Hayward? Like kind of, and maybe like spin it back at him a little bit. But I think we're on the mend nonetheless with the pool guy. So
good.
Yeah.
Bring him a treat. See what he bring him a bagel.
Bring him a bagel.
Cupcake.
This is how we do it on Long Island. We bring our pool people bagels.
Bring him a bagel. Bring him a cup of coffee, a crumble cookie. I don't know. Everybody could be plied with food, I feel like. Especially at work. That's a thing.
I agree. I got to say, this guy's got a passion for pools, which I appreciate.
Oh, he's into it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So you bring up you talk stock and trade then.
Right.
Yeah.
So
like you were saying, have you seen the new filter?
We'll be back there in the coming months, and
good luck.
I'll make sure to give you an update. Thank you.
Good luck with that.
All right. Let's talk about Game of Thrones season 5. This is our 5th episode. Naturally, 2015 is when this aired on HBO. I just watched it. So now I'm in the territory where I've only seen it once. Starting with season 5, I've definitely only seen all of this one time, because I was trying to think, and I think I think I put this out there, but I don't know for sure. Is that I stopped watching Game of Thrones. I watched Game of Thrones like up to season 3 or 4. Then I stopped. Then I went back and started watching it to like season 3, and then I just stopped again. Then I think it ended in 2019, or it must have ended in 2019.
Yeah,
because
that sounds right.
Because when that was happening on HBO, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to time it so that I watch all of it leading up to the last episode. And I actually did it. And so like, I didn't want the end to be spoiled for me.
Right.
And so I'm in the territory now where I've only seen these once. So this is my second time through season 5 of Game of Thrones.
That's exciting.
And I think this is a great season. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff here. What I will say is that, in my opinion, Micah disagreed when I brought this up, which I was surprised by, but we diverge. I was like, I feel like you can tell that the show gets worse this season. Like, this is when it starts to teeter. I don't know if it's like going down yet, but it's like plateaued. Because I think from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, it was like building. And then 5, I was like, okay, now we're like kind of like in a good space, but I don't think it's getting any better. And my major complaint, if I had one about this season, although there are many compliments that I want to give it, I have myriad notes and lots of things to talk about, is I think this season feels rushed. I don't know, like, I know that it starts getting away from the book a lot. We have a question about that as well. And I know that the books start getting bigger too. I memean, I bought them. Yeah. The books do get longer. So I don't know that they would have been. And again, I keep bringing up Micah, but she's the one. I don't want to steal her point. She's the one that brought this up. Is like, they really could have nipped this in the bud and killed 2 birds with 1 stone by splitting the season into 20 episodes and maturing a lot of the storylines that seem rushed. Because all the stuff with Tommen's weird. They ignore Bran completely in this season, which I have no problem with. But that's interesting. I doubt that that's in the book, that they just don't talk about Bran for an entire book.
Yeah,
I doubt
great
that.
point. Yeah.
So I think they had to make a stylistic choice there. I think the stuff with the faith, the what are they called? The crazy militant faith people.
Oh, the faith militant, sure.
Faith militant, right?
Sure.
That's an awesome arc. That's very reminiscent of Protestantism and the Reformation and all that in my mind. And they kind of go through it too quickly. And so it's actually a compliment maybe to the show. My biggest complaint is that It's like, man, let it breathe a little bit.
Yeah.
Sir Meryn is in striking distance of Arya, and you spend 5 minutes. She's been saying his name the entire series.
He's been on that
and
list.
then they just get it over with, right? That's the problem, is it just feels like it's too many cool things are dispensed with. And if I were a betting man, I would think that they realized when it was too late that, man, we should have stretched this out, because as I brought up Micah's point, she was the one that said, then they could have gotten more from the books. And although it wouldn't have been ameliorated, because we know now that George Martin just hasn't fucking written anything, basically since the show began, I think maybe one book came out right after the show began, and that's it. So I think they might have gotten more blood from the stone by acting like that. And I think that that's my biggest complaint, because there's a lot of really cool stuff to explore here, a lot of interesting characters. And I don't think they spend enough time exploring them before we get to what's next. So
sure.
Let me throw it over to you. What do you think of season 5 as an overarching thing of Game of Thrones?
I like you saying that, describing the season, that it's kind of plateauing or leveling off. I think that's kind of a really fair description. And there is a lot. They do try to cram a lot inside of 10 hours. And I think doubling down on that, you definitely reminded me of that. I think season 5, this is kind of an exciting conversation, because I think it's still Game of Thrones in its prime. Like we said, I think maybe you could argue that it's starting on the downslope of that prime now. And it's interesting, like you, I don't remember. There was a lot of surprises for me in this season, things that I had forgotten. And I think season 6 is the same for me. I don't exactly remember now where it's going to go. But I think there's plenty of excitement in the season. You could argue it's not quite maybe as great as seasons 3 and 4, but new alliances are forged, new enemies are set against each other, new knowledge comes to light, new characters are crossing up for the first time, a few key character deaths in this season. So plenty to talk about, but definitely you make me realize that they did cram a lot into this season. And even though that wasn't my initial takeaway, or at least my go-to prime takeaway, that it felt rushed, it definitely, as I think about it and absorb that, it definitely is something where they just kind of gloss over a lot of things. I think they do they do a good job. I think the writing is still good. I think there's some great performances this season. But that is an interesting point too, how they just skip over the whole Hodor, Bran, three-eyed raven thing. That's not in this season anywhere. But I do like the way this season, oftentimes the seasons are bookended with such great moments, and I do like the bookending of this season. And then there's so much that happens in between in that 10 hours. Again, kind of daunting to talk about it, but we'll do our best.
Yeah, no, it is. It's totally daunting. I don't think I have so many notes. And I think the best way is we'll just kind of go through them in the order that I've written them here, and then I'm sure we'll just go into many different directions.
Yeah, sounds good.
The beginning of season 5, or at least near the beginning, starts with a flashback from Cersei when she's a kid. Now, I like this a lot. And the witch accurately predicts her future, or so it seems. I thought I remembered that this was resolved, that something happens with the witch. Am I crazy? Because it wasn't resolved in the season. Do we go back to this later?
That's a great question. I don't remember season 6 at all.
No, I don't remember. I basically don't remember anything from this point.
Nothing.
So I was thinking about that. I'm like, I could have sworn they go back and like something crazy happens with the witch, but I think I'm making that up. Like they kill the witch, or like the witch, like something like, I don't know, but I guess not. Like they just, because it's one of those things, like where you introduce a flashback and then it pays off later. I'm like, what was the payoff? Did I totally miss it? Because I think I'm sitting here watching and I'm writing notes, but
I wonder, it does ring a bell for some reason.
But the show doesn't often, but does sometimes play with time. I'm wondering how you feel about seeing a young Cersei, and I don't know that it's relevant really, but this idea that she's kind of implanted with this notion that these things are going to happen, these various things are going to happen. It's not unlike in my own life how I told you a Ouija board told me that I would die when I was 23, when I was like 10 or whatever, and I remembered that until I was 23, and when I was 23, I thought about it all the time. I was like, is it gonna? And when I became 24, I was like, holy shit, it's fake. But what I do remember, and as I've said, I remember that it told me my friend Tim would die when he was 56, and oh, God forbid that happens, but like, what if that happened? And I was like, holy
So creepy.
fuck, you know? So what do you think about this introduction to a younger Cersei, but also, again, an invocation of blood magic and all this other stuff, this supernaturalism, but very light touches of supernaturalism, believable touches. So what do you make of it?
Yeah, I love the foreshadowing, and I like the conceit of wanting to know your fortune, although that's extremely dangerous. And you don't know what you're getting, because our human nature, we want to hear something good, we want to hear something positive, but you're going to hear whatever you're going to hear. So, and I love stepping back into blood magic. I really wish that I guess that character with Cersei was just a childhood friend, but it would be cool if that character was somebody that we saw, again in the future. That would have been kind of neat. And it was just a treat to see adolescent, preteen, just young teen Cersei, and that attitude, it carried over. The casting was amazing. I mean, she really felt like Cersei from 30 years prior or something. It was really, really cool. And just that kind of just the way she obviously always sort of took that attitude of that unapologetic, a little bit fearless, holier than thou, pushing her weight around, and that the fact that some things never changed. And also knowing such a sharp, seemingly could be devastating prophecy, right? That it didn't change anything about her. You would think like, all right, I'm going to dial back the control freak thing, or maybe be a little less evil, but she's leaning into on it.
She's leaning into the predestination of it almost,
totally,
which is interesting.
Yeah. And it speaks directly to what's going on with Dany, the younger queen, prettier queen, and all that kind of stuff. And we know it's going to happen. It's foreshadowing in our story, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, I like beginning like that. It felt a little lost, like, which I like flashbacks when they're appropriate and respected. I just could, in my mind when I was watching it, I'm like, yeah, they go back at some point.
I wonder.
And the witch, like they kill the witch, or like they kill the girl or something. I could have sworn, but I don't think that happens. I don't know why that memory is implanted in my mind.
We got to see.
At the beginning too, we see the result of Varys helping Tyrion escape after he kills Tywin, and they leave Westeros. What did you think about seeing those two again? I love their interactions. They're amongst my favorite combination of actors. This season, and we'll go into it, really brings to bear a lot of different and interesting character combinations where you're like, wow, this is a scene with this person and this person. Very interesting. Never even would have expected that. Or I always wonder that those dynamics too, like they might not ever, if you're in the Jon Snow storyline, you might never, ever, ever see anyone that ever worked on the capital storyline.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I always find that interesting with a cast this big. So it's cool to see them cross over, and I'd love to know more stories about that, about how that all went. But nonetheless, what did you make of seeing Tyrion again in his kind of state, and Varys kind of convincing him? Now it's interrupted by events with Jorah later on, but it kind of convinces him like, you need to go and seek out Daenerys. And what do you make of that?
It's so cool. And that whole dynamic, I think in season 5, they said they filmed in 5 separate countries, if I'm not mistaken: Ireland, Croatia, Iceland, Spain. So when those eventual character cross-ups that we're waiting for happen, they're such events. But that's a great point too. It's also that way for the cast and crew. Might be their first time in that spot. Later on, we see certain characters in King's Landing. I know for a fact that those characters had never been there before, later on in season 7 and so forth. But, I love the dynamic between Varys and Tyrion. It's really kind of this mutual respect and admiration society that these two have for each other that's growing. And I love that. I always think about Varys and Littlefinger and Peter Baelish kind of in the same breath. They're both kind of these, when we meet them as early as season 1, they're both kind of these shadowy figures. They command these networks of spies. They're kind of spy masters, and they operate in the shadows. And it seems like season 5 really defined each of them, where Varys says very early on to Ned Stark before Ned's death, he says what he's really all about is peace. And
the realm.
That's always planted. That seed's always planted in your head as you watch Varys maneuver, and is he on the up and up? And it turns out that he is. And Tyrion sort of lost his lease for life. Like he kind of checked out. after finding out about Shay and murdering his father and being whisked out of King's Landing and rescued by Jaime and Varys. But he was kind of cashed out. He kind of cashed in his chips, and there was an apathy, and you felt so he's just overcome with sadness and guilt and all the tragic things that befell his family, some at his hands. So it's interesting that Varys is the one to partially rescue him, but that's also for Varys's sake, for Varys's plans, because he sees Tyrion as part of that plan because he knows how adept politically Tyrion is, how he could talk, how he's going to be how Varys thinks Tyrion's going to be an important figure in this kind of new world order. So it works in Varys's favor too, because Varys needs Tyrion, or at least he feels he does. And at the same time, this season with Littlefinger sort of shows us his true colors when he just completely throws Sansa into harm's way, just at his own behest to further his own ends. So it's interesting that Varys and Littlefinger, we both have a pretty good idea of what they're about now, and it seems like Littlefinger is really the bad guy, and Varys is going to have some sort of a more honorable role to play in things, which I think is really kind of neat. And I love the way the two bicker, but the way the two kind of believe in each other. And season 5 had a lot of that. There was a lot of shedding of light on things that you've been questioning for the first 4 seasons or so, which is kind of a lot of payoffs, which is kind of satisfying, I think.
Definitely. Like, you want, at least to a degree, everyone's always backstabbing each other. Like you were saying with Littlefinger, it's so 007 like, where you can't even keep up with the backstabbing and the double dealing and like what the point is. It almost becomes like so insane and chaotic for chaos's sake. And you're right, with Varys, even in the very beginning when he would go and visit Ned Stark in the dungeon, he would talk about the realm and peace and the longevity of these things that they hold dear, and that he doesn't really care about anything else. And I think we touched on it earlier in another episode, but I love that Varys is a eunuch, because they talk about, in season 4 how this all happened. But I think like what I appreciate it most is that it kind of insinuates perhaps that by doing that to him, it unleashed this. It's almost like George in Seinfeld, that really awesome episode where he isn't interested in women anymore, so he becomes really smart. You almost like did him a favor, and I almost feel like Varys sees in Tyrion himself, but addled to the vice of the world and not willing to use his God-given talents for the betterment of the realm. It's almost what we were talking about with Spider-Man 2 on another episode recently, where I was saying like it's kind of fucked up that the choice is put with Peter Parker, where it's like, no, this is what you have to do. You were given this power. And it's like, dude, I was just bitten by a spider,
Right.
And I kind of feel the same thing with Varys, where it's like, well, you were put in this unfortunate situation and you could use it as a crutch for the rest of your life and feel bad for yourself, but you've actually just freed yourself from one of the earthly vices that will allow you to utilize your skill. And I don't think that's a secret. Like, I don't think that that's like unintentional. I think that that is supposed to be read into it. And so I really enjoy their characters and their interactions as well. It's frustrating because when Jorah gets involved later, which we'll talk about later on, it frustrates, as Tyrion says to him himself, it's like he frustrates a plan that was just going to happen anyway. It was just a total waste of time and effort, right?
Hilarious.
It helped Jorah, but it didn't do anything for the others. All right, so as we move on, we are introduced to the Sons of the Harpy and this kind of growing resistance to Daenerys. And I really found this interesting because, for multiple reasons. Number one is you see the Unsullied themselves kind of grappling with their existence, going to like a whorehouse, but like just sitting with, I thought it was very deep, like sitting with a prostitute and she's just like shushing him and rubbing his head. And like they obviously, right, they're obviously eunuchs too, so they can't do anything about that. And they don't have those urges, but they have the urge perhaps of nurturing, of like wondering what it was like to have a normal upbringing. And I really loved seeing that side of them. But Daenerys also hasn't come to terms with the fact that though she by brute force freed these slaves and reworked this society that is going back thousands of years, potentially with Marine and all these other places, that a lot of the people, even the downtrodden, didn't want this. And don't know what to really do with themselves. And I find that a really interesting thing. You saw it to a much lesser extent than it's insinuated in this story. After the Civil War, a lot of people didn't really know quite what they were supposed to do, right? No one wanted to go back to the status quo per se, but it almost seemed like, well, you had a master and you had a place to be and you had a purpose, and then you're kind of, you, not your children, not people that didn't know any better, but you are brought to this new reality and you have no idea how to act. And I thought it was really cool. Like, though I have a hard time caring very much about what happens with Daenerys compared to a lot of other storylines, I cared more, I think, in this season than I did in the past, because I think that everything started to become more dynamic over there, not only interpersonally, and we have deaths with Barristan and Grey Worm almost dies and Jorah comes and goes and all this other stuff, but
absolutely.
the reality of the fact that she's kind of like a conqueror, and they come to terms with it. I mean, I think Tyrion says later on, like, why don't you just stay here? But it brings up the point that, and it brings up the absurdity of all of this shit, right? Like the claims and the bloodlines and all this, and it's absurd. Like, and that's the thing with Daenerys, is that bothers me, and I don't know if it's supposed to as the story goes on, but it's just like, what are you even doing? Like, I don't understand how you even came to this position, because you are anyway, I'm going on and on. So talk to me a little bit about how you feel about what's going on with her and Marine and the slaves and the fighting pit and whatever else you want to bring up.
Yeah, it is. I mean, a lot of the stuff that goes on with Daenerys really is beholden to prophecy and just the people around her buoying her and sort of believing in her. That's even why Varys and Tyrion are on this road now, which is so interesting. But I like the political reality of the situation. She's sort of marching through Slaver's Bay, liberating, quote unquote, liberating these cities that really only knew previously one way of life. And now she's dealing with the fallout of people, like you said, Kyle, not really knowing how to adjust to this new life. And I love the way that kind of comes to a point with the Sons of the Harpy. Feels very realistic, because now you have these seemingly noble Myronese families that are forming this resistance or opposition group to Daenerys's rule, that want to restore slavery and their former way of life to Marine. Some would call it a terrorist group. But there's strength in numbers there, and there's a lot of them, and they're secret, they're shrouded in secrecy, and you really worry for Daenerys and the Unsullied and for Daario and the rest, because they're fighting a proper foe. You know, it's almost like fighting ninjas, and they don't really have any answers. They don't know numbers. It's not conventional warfare. So now they're dealing with this giant backlash, and it's dangerous. And I think this is where they know that characters like Tyrion could come and sort of be implemented and leveraged in a way to help, because they don't just need warriors. They don't just need fighters. It's not just brute force. They're dealing with these other political ramifications as well. And that's not ending. And, you know, a lot of drama happens in the wake of that. The reopening of the fighting pits, because they want to kind of placate the people by restoring some sort of way of life that they're used to. Miss Sandé trying to help out and being a little lost. We almost lose Grey Worm, as you said. So there's a lot of drama that befall, you know, Sir Barristan's struck down by the Sons of the Harpy. Valiant, you know, he fights them the best that he can, but he's killed. And of course, you know, here comes Ser Jorah trying to get back into Khaleesi's good graces a couple of times over the course of the season. But I like the arc. This was probably through all the seasons so far my favorite Daenerys arc, because of everything that's happening. And of course, everything comes to a head with Drogon returning. And, you know, in the meantime, Khaleesi, this mother of dragons, and I think Jorah warned her of this in season 3 or 4, that these are still wild beasts. So even this prophetic mother of dragons may not be able to control these. The wild beast, Khaleesi. And, you know, Viserion and Rhaegal are locked in a dungeon, and Drogon's off.
It's sad. I don't like that.
Gallivanting, you know, I feel bad he's off wild.
Yeah, I feel bad. I feel bad for the dragons in the crypt by themselves, but then I also feel bad for the fact that, like, one of them is just kind of hanging out, you know, right. Like, and just living
just roaming free.
Yeah, just doing whatever he wants to do, while the other two are just trapped down there. It's
Waiting for
sad.
Khaleesi to find her, waiting for Daenerys to find her voice. I read about this to some degree, and maybe it's because they go into it more in the novels, but supposedly, and maybe they do mention it in passing in the series, but supposedly it's all to do with her level of confidence and leadership over them. Like if they feel that she's sort of on the fence or afraid in some way, or there's no conviction there or fearlessness, then the dragons won't respond to her.
Interesting.
So and I guess that's what's going on with Drogon. Like he's waiting for her
yeah,
to
I guess
be the proper.
They kind of do it. I'm sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, I guess they kind of do insinuate this, because when there's like a villager comes and sees her and she's like, my kid or whatever died because of the dragon, I think that's when she puts them away. So there is some sort of insinuation about that, but it's not looked at as like a systemic thing. It just looks like it looks like she's just being cruel to them, which is I don't know why it's hard. I don't know why it's hard to watch that, but it's just like, I don't like this.
And they kind of take it. I mean, they could murder her.
Oh my God.
When she puts them down there.
Yeah. When they go down later on with the prisoners, they could just do them all in, which is interesting. Yeah. They could have killed them all, but
they're so smart. I'm so interested in the dragons.
Yeah, me too.
And we'll get more of that later on.
All right. Let's set more of the scene as we go on. We'll get back here with Stannis and the Red Woman, Melisandre, at the wall. Now, this is where I think a lot of the new acting combinations come in, which I think is interesting. You see Stannis with Jon Snow. You see Mance with Stannis. You see Davos with Jon Snow. You see Davos with Mance. A lot of interesting combos there. Plus, Dragon's Bane, whatever the hell his name is, and all these other people that are just kind of in the works. So it's cool to see finally Stannis' story kind of intercept and Melisandre intercept with some other characters. And it's interesting. And you see it at the end. I mean, and we'll get more into Stannis, but he just becomes so craven. And it's interesting watching him kind of deteriorate in this season. I like this character a lot. And it kind of ruins it knowing that the actor didn't like playing him, as we mentioned. And that was like, he was always confused, because you see it and you're like, really? Like, you're so good at this.
He's so good.
But then
one of the best.
Yeah, he's awesome. And but we always make fun of him where, like, when we're watching and someone asks him a question, he's like, I have no idea. Like, no idea what's going on. Like, there's some scenes where I just look at some of the stuff going on and I'm like, my God, like, he probably is, but maybe that's always been overstated. I don't know, but he's awesome. And but I love how the cravenness builds, and he's like, fuck it, we'll use the wildlings as our army after our army gets wiped out at the Blackwater Bay, and then they kind of reconstitute and they surround the wildlings and have them dead to rights. And now, and I have to ask you about this too, this is where the term bend the knee comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate that term. I hate it. And the reason I hate it is because everyone said it for, I would love to see the Google's, I'd love to see the Google trend for it, because I never heard anyone in my entire life say bend the knee. Never in my life.
No.
So this came out in 2015. So I was 31 years old. In that entire time, I had never heard anyone ever say bend the knee. And then it became this thing and was just run into the ground. It just became obnoxious, in my opinion. So I always think when he kept saying it, and I was like, oh my God, just bend the knee. Why has no one said this for 4 seasons? And you're acting like it's just a thing people say to each other. I don't understand. There's other opportunities for people to have said this in the past. But
isn't that funny?
Anyway, what do you think about Stannis as we present him, his cravenness, and kind of how he gets ingratiated with the Night's Watch and puts himself up basically at Castle Black, which is pretty fascinating too, as he, at this point in the beginning is dwelling an attack on Winterfell.
Yeah, it was cool to see Stannis and Davos arrive at the wall. That was really neat. And sort of hanging out up there and restoring his army and eating and resting and all that kind of stuff. And the tragedy of Stannis' arc really plays out over the course of this season. And it is tragic because he, on the one hand, seems like he has some sort of wisdom. But then I think what you said, that he's just so at the center of things, just craven and power hungry, and really does at the end of the day want to claim the Iron Throne. I mean, that's kind of his end all be all. At the same time, he has the wisdom to, which a lot of people in the realm don't. He has the wisdom to know that their best bet is to band together with the wildlings, and even offers them a life and land if they'll help him, if they'll kind of form an alliance with him and help him take the North. And he even offers Jon Snow a lordship. He says, I'll make you a Stark. It's what you always dreamed of, and I'll make you the Warden of the North. And Jon Snow sort of doubles down on his dedication to the Night's Watch and turns it down. But I love Jon Snow becomes a more interesting character the more would-be father figures he's surrounded by. And I love his relatively brief but very emotional exchanges with Mance Rayder over the course of the season, and sort of that mutual respect that they have. And the same thing with Stannis. They know that Jon is young, but that he's brave and courageous and a good leader and all of those things. And Tormund knows that too, and kind of has to sell Jon to the wildlings at hard hand and just say, look, he's a I know this is our mortal lifelong enemy, but this is a proper leader. And Tormund is another one of those guys who has the wisdom to kind of set aside their differences to band together in the face of this new threat that a lot of people don't acknowledge yet, even through season 5, because it's not real enough for everybody yet. But it's happening. It's happening slowly. Those gears are turning. And, everything with Stannis, you don't really know where it's going because, he has the common sense to want to band together with the wildlings. He has the common sense to want to form this allegiance with Jon Snow. But then again, he's kind of being pulled along by this Red Priestess. And, it all culminates in him murdering his own daughter. And it's really horrifying. And I don't want to read too deep into this, but I think he sends away Davos knowing he's going to do that.
Oh yeah, I think so too. I think that's exactly the reason he does.
And he doesn't strike while the iron's hot. He ends up sort of attacking the Boltons and Winterfell with half his forces and no horses, and they're freezing and starving. So there's so many tragic things as that snowball just kind of gains momentum down the mountain. And then of course he's slain by Brienne. And that's how it ends for him. It's so good. I love that acting bit where he takes out the 2 Bolton soldiers, even though he's injured. But they cut his leg and he just acts like, you know what I mean? He acts so frustrated that he's wounded as he sits up against the tree before Brienne reveals herself.
Right.
So you're really great acting. It is interesting because you look at this guy, he's not Leo DiCaprio or Robert De Niro. It's like, what else has this guy been in that he would that we always hear the stories of how he really didn't enjoy the role, that he just couldn't wait for it to be over. This guy.
Yeah, it's like
he's so good at it in spite of that.
It's funny. I think that's funny too. Stephen Delane, he plays Thomas Jefferson in John Adams on HBO, and he's awesome in that role too.
Good actor.
Really, really awesome version of Thomas Jefferson. Very like cocky and aloof and all that's interesting. Oh yeah, dude, we should do that series. It's really, really good.
Yeah, we really should.
It's only 6 episodes, I think, something like that. 7 episodes.
Oh, super easy.
Yeah, it's not a hard watch. It's fucking awesome. You're gonna wish it was 7 seasons when you're done with it. Okay, so we have that stuff established. Let's get some other things established here as well. First of all, I just love when we see Robin fighting with a sword. That's like a totally meaningless scene, but Robin fighting with a sword, and Lord Royce says he swings a sword like a girl with palsy, which is like an amazing line. So I wanted to give a shout out to
Lord Royce. That guy is underrated.
Yeah, he's
Robin
awesome.
He's
he's great. He's just like whatever, man. Okay, so let's move on and talk a little bit about. Well, actually, the next up that I want to bring up is Cousin Lancel.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I guess we'll just talk about the High Sparrow.
Who saw this coming?
I mean, it's actually pretty interesting because you wonder. In the book, it's probably much more subtle because there's a lot more characterization. There's a lot more time. So it's like, oh, Cersei has an affair with her cousin or whatever. And it's like, that's probably something that's stretched down maybe. And then when he comes back, you realize, like, I guess retroactively, like, oh, okay, that's why that entire arc was in this, because otherwise, what was the point of all that? And you realize that Lancel actually is like it was actually there at a lot of really fucked up things. Like, he definitely got Baratheon too drunk. He definitely was having sex with Cersei. He was definitely doing all these things. So watching him pop back in as part of this religious sect is really interesting. And it brings us to the High Sparrow as well. Now, remember, our show is on Patreon, and you can support us on patreon.com/laststandmedia and get early ad-free access and the ability to submit your inquiries to the show. Jay Bands wrote in and said, "What's up, DNC? For season 5, I wanted to talk about the whole High Sparrow, Cersei, and Tommen storyline. The most interesting part of this story is how the young King Tommen is being manipulated by his wife and his mother and isn't able to realize what's going on until it's too late. Tommen being so naive makes you wonder how tough it would be for a young king in this cutthroat GOT world. Also, when Cersei is overthrown and imprisoned by the High Sparrow, we realize Tywin may have been right. She isn't as smart as she thinks she is. A man has no name." Thank you, Jay Vance, for writing in. So this is the best part of the season to me, and had me really feeling like, man, this in and of itself would be an awesome story to tell and give us a little more grounding in the religion. We see some of the religious rites. We know that we hear some of the stuff they say about the 7 gods when they get married. We hear that multiple times, all of those interesting things. And it's cool. It's cool that they have like this rigorous ethos of their main religion. And then there's other religions as well. The old gods that they still acknowledge up in the north, for instance, and the gods across the narrow sea. But I dig that there's this, in my opinion, like almost to the point of being overt, this Reformation Catholic versus Protestant thing here, which I can't help but escape that. I just feel like that's obvious. Catholicism was often rightfully abused for being, flagrant with its money and hypocritical, and no one lived by the creed and indulgences and all this kind of stuff. I mean, that's what brought out all of the Lollardly first and then the proper Protestant religions later on. And so I see that here and I dig it. Like, I really dig it. These guys carve stars into their own foreheads and walk around with clubs and wear these cloaks, and they're led by this guy, the High Sparrow, Jonathan Pryce. Fucking awesome. Just so absolutely awesome.
So good.
And just one of the great characters, I think, in the entire show. But you know that underneath the facade, he is full of shit. Like, he, in my opinion, I don't want to get season 6 yet where he's in that as well, but you know that it's real, but it's performative. You know that it's more than him being just a Mother Teresa. It's not. There's more to it than that. And it's fun to watch Cersei finally create a monster that she cannot control by bringing back this ancient, because we find out that the organization that they're bringing back is hundreds of years dormant and was put away because it was out of control at the time. And now they have control over even the monarchy themselves. And so this is good shit. I mean, I love this. And that's why I wish that this was longer, because it's like, this could have been 10 episodes, just this part of it. Nonetheless, everything else that we need to get through. So how do you feel about the High Sparrow and this move towards Puritanism that we see?
It's so good, man. Who would have expected this? I mean, you still have King's Landing, the Lannister army, one of the most powerful armies, probably not susceptible to being taken over with military might by most foes in the world, but slowly being taken out from the inside. And, this all comes down from the power vacuum that's created in Tywin's death, because they say this faith militant, this cult, the Sparrows, this organization has been lingering, maybe over Casterly Rock or in other places, but never dared under Tywin to enter King's Landing. They know Tywin would never have that. So in the wake of Tywin and possibly Joffrey and everything that kind of, all those dominoes that fell, in the wake of all those characters not being there anymore, and it's just Cersei now, they saw an opening. And they come in and you have these zealots, this unforgiving, hard line, hard right religious organization that Cersei sees an opportunity to basically use against the Tyrells. She welcomes them with open arms and gives them power and props them up. And you know what happens? They come for her. And, she ends up taking out the Tyrells, right? She ends up imprisoning Loras and Marjorie. And then she ends up suffering the same fate herself. It's so interesting. And Jonathan Pryce, man, as soon as he popped up and just enjoying his whole performance again, he plays humility, or possibly false humility. We don't. That's how
it feels
yet.
to me. Yeah, like it feels like that, which is great. You know,
like that holier than thou, but
Right.
quiet, but doing it quietly. I think the first time I ever saw him was in Glengarry Glen Ross with
Yeah.
Pacino and Baldwin and Jack Lemmon and Kevin Spacey. And he plays a small part in that Jonathan Pryce, but he's so good. And it's such an interesting character because now we're getting this whole different take. It's not like this military infighting that we've mostly seen over the past 4 seasons or so. It's something else, and something else that's powerful, and something else that's a big threat. And again, the way Cersei sort of allowed it. And the other thing that surprised me was at the center of this whole thing is a power struggle over Tommen. Now, Tommen is not cut out for this world. He doesn't have the skill set or the tools to be king. He really needed Tywin pulling those puppet strings. When Tywin was killed, Tommen was that was the end for Tommen, I think, because he doesn't really have the conviction. He's too nice. I mean, he's too gentle, and he's being pulled between he's serving two different lords, and his mom and Marjorie. The thing that surprised me about this season was Marjorie brought a lot of Cersei's wrath on herself by being so flippant, like insulting Cersei in front of her girls and saying, "Oh, what do I call you now? The Queen Regent or Queen Mother?" You know what I mean? Like kind of these digs and these barbs and this. I don't even know what Marjorie could have been thinking. I think Marjorie's out of her league with Cersei, and I think a lot of that was Cersei exacting revenge, because I'm not sure how it would have went if Marjorie just relinquished or seemingly just relinquished a little of that control and sort of behaved a little more behind the scenes with Tommen instead of trying to force everything her way immediately. And then seeing really powerful characters like Lady Olenna come in and really not have a leg to stand on against the Faith Militant. You know, she can't negotiate. She can't use her money for leverage. She can't use her power. And we see this is a proper foe for the Lannisters and Tyrells. And when the season, it's so funny because I don't remember how it continues into season 6, but I'm really looking forward to it because I completely forgot how it resolves.
Yeah, it's fun to see, and they go into it and they say it somewhat literally at times, but this idea that your money doesn't matter, your positions of power don't matter. There's nothing you can do about this. It reminds me a little bit of an echo of when Jaime gets his hand cut off. They kind of say the same thing to him. There's nothing you can do, like there's nothing you can do for us. And it's fun to see them have to be contorted into these pretzels. Even characters you like you said, Olenna and others, like they actually are confronted at one point, the Tyrells, when I don't know if Olenna's talking to Cersei before she's arrested or who it is, but she's basically like, we're just going to withhold our food. It's insinuated over and over again that they own like the farmlands, basically.
Sure. Yeah.
But then they say something. Oh no, maybe it's the High Sparrow. And like, have you ever sowed the soil yourself? Because he basically said that's who it was. Because he was basically saying like the people are cognizant of what's going on. Like there's a class revolution happening here, and it's not really important to the overall story, but I think it's one of the most interesting parts of Game of Thrones, at least so far, is just watching this develop and watching it all culminate, obviously, with Cersei's embarrassment, which we'll talk about later.
Oh my God.
But how do you find Lancel and his performance in this? I like that they stuck with the same actor the entire time, which is something that they don't do with some other actors. And I don't know if Myrcella's been the same or not. I don't think so.
No, they changed her for season 5, I think.
And I think Tommen has been different at times too, maybe early on, but
yep.
But they stick it with it here. What do you make of that?
I like the poetry of this seemingly insignificant or minor character coming back to play a big part in things and sort of cast King's Landing or the Lannisters this role of like this new foe that they don't know how to fight. And I like the consistency of it too. It's very thoughtful because Lancel was injured at the Battle of Blackwater and he took the arrow just like above the heart and he still had the injury there. And Cersei asked him about that. And I remember when that season wrapped, with that season 2 or 3, thinking like, did Lancel just die? Did he die of his wounds? I wasn't really sure. So to see him come back was interesting. He's also the son of Tywin's brother, who's the one who's fighting Cersei on the Small Council during the season. He's like the military advisor.
Yeah, we don't really see a lot of him.
No, we don't. He kind of comes and goes. Takes on a very minor role.
And they insinuate that he's kind of like an asshole too, and like a blowhard with some dialogue. So
I think he was another one that kind of stayed on because of Tywin, right? And in the wake of Tywin's death, this kind of new order and the shifting kind of occurred with the Lannisters. And the thing with Lancel is you're wondering, like, is he going to? He's part of this religious order, but we know about his involvement with Cersei. And that was the whole thing with, the Lannisters are canoodling with family again. And that was kind of fucked up, that arc, because that was when Jaime was captured. This is supposedly the love of Cersei's life, even though that gets dark. And she's boffing her cousin. And this whole thing with Tyrion sort of taking advantage of Lancel and kind of making him his puppet because he's another one of those idiots, and the whole political intrigue with Shay and everything. And then for this character to come back and basically say, like, Cersei's, I already atoned for my sins. Now I have to, he basically drags all her shit out on the carpet. When Cersei goes through all that, Kyle, she's such a relentless bitch, right? Kind of a hard character to feel sympathy for. But did you find yourself feeling bad for her when she's kind of dragged into the whole thing, imprisoned in the cell, no food, no water, run naked with her hair cut off, run naked along the streets with people throwing rotten fruit at her? Did you feel bad for her in that moment?
Yeah, we should talk about that, I guess. Ernie M wrote in, said, "Hey gang, Cersei's walk of shame is the season's defining moment, in my opinion. I remember feeling bad when I first watched it, but now I kind of enjoyed it. You guys feel bad for Cersei? Should we feel bad? Thanks." No, I mean, like, you can't. You feel bad in the moment, yes. Like, is it a way I would punish a prisoner or a malcontent or something? No. But no one, if anyone deserved that, it's her. It's hard for me to feel bad. Like, she is just hopelessly evil. Hopelessly evil. It's insanity. Like, it's totally sociopathic and insane. And any way that she gets her comeuppance is good. The problem is that this just hardens and makes her worse. So, and she's, as her I guess, her uncle says on the Small Council, like, you've surrounded yourself with sycophants, and it's true. Like, the only people at the end that are left are people that are just totally devoted to her and to the power and to the Lannisters because they've lost a lot.
Yep.
And so, no, I don't particularly feel bad for her. That scene is awesome. Micah had let me know that it was a body double that played Cersei. I didn't know that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And they, I guess, maybe digitally put her face on there or whatever. But I love the priestess character, like the nun character is awesome. So many great memes with her, like the shame memes and stuff like that.
Sister Maria.
I
don't know. I just call her that.
Oh, okay. Is that what her? I don't know what her name is.
She reminds me of The Sound of Music. I don't know why it is. I don't know.
It's Septa Unella, Hannah Waddingham.
Unella. Oh, yeah. God, she's scary. She's scarier than the High Sparrow.
Yeah, she's awesome. Yeah, she's great. And it reminds me a little bit of The Handmaid's Tale, just in that it shows that even though this is a masculine and misogynistic society, that there are women that play a role and play a powerful role behind the scenes, which is totally a huge part of Handmaid's Tale. And one of the really interesting parts of Handmaid's Tale is how women are part of the reason that this happens in the first place, and then they're disempowered by the very people that they empower. So I have a hard time feeling bad for Cersei, but you don't want to see it. It's like watching the execution of someone who murdered someone. It's not necessarily pleasant.
They really torture. I mean, but you know what, though? It shows you again, Cersei, yeah, she's evil and conniving. She has middling intelligence, but she doesn't have the wisdom. Glass House Cersei is going to throw stones. That revenge plan against the Tyrells completely backfired, and that's why it happened to her.
Yeah, unforced error.
Again, she let them in.
Yeah.
She gave them power. She put them up on the pedestal. She gave them the maneuverability to, sort of change everything. It was a big tonal shift for that whole place. And just knowing that they were around and probably posturing behind the scenes, just waiting to be able to come into King's Landing, makes it even more insidious when you think about that, and just sort of acting and being opportunists, and just waiting till they knew that they had that opening. It's so evil. And, you're kind of waiting. You see Jonathan Pryce, you see the High Sparrow, you see this order, you see all the monks or the high militant muscle with their clubs and everything. And you're waiting for them over the course of season 5 to sort of reveal themselves as just as corrupt as Cersei, as the Lannisters, as the High Septon who gets caught in the brothel. And they don't. They really don't reveal themselves. They seem squeaky clean and actually holier than thou when the season ends. Again, I don't remember where it goes in season 6. But something is amiss with this.
Right. That's what I was saying with the Jonathan Pryce character too, the High Sparrow. It's not that I think that like you would find him, banging some little boy or something like that. Like
right.
What I think is that like his vice is power. Like he knows he's powerful. Like that's what he wants. It's not about the earthly things that he's letting go, because that's kind of what he craves. That's why I think the performance is so multidimensional, because he is playing, as you said, like the very nunnish, very holy kind of character.
Yeah.
And he does it very well, but that there's just a layer underneath it that's not what it seems. And I love that scene when they go and they take the High Septon in the especially because when they take him in the brothel, he's like playing into this whole thing of like selecting these priestess like hookers and all this. It's interesting. It's really interesting stuff, and it's got, like I said, it's just so brutally Reformation politics. It's good. It's cool. It's interesting to see. I mean, it's way worse than what was going on then, of course, but it shows that there are these interpretations of their religion where you don't need to kind of interface with a priest to have that relationship. You need to do good acts. It's totally obviously a version of that. So I like that. Now, we haven't brought up Littlefinger too deeply yet. We know that he's with Sansa. Lysa's dead, as we saw in season 4. But he's married in, so he's got like control of the Knights of the Vale.
Yes.
And Brienne and Podrick encounter them at a pub. And this is interesting because it's hard to know. Like, Brienne starts to get frustrating for me at this point a little bit.
Okay.
It's like, what are you doing? She gets on her knee and like, swears her allegiance to Sansa, and she's kind of like, whatever, doesn't want any part of it. They ride, and Podrick almost gets killed and all the rest, and shows some gallantry and heartwarmingly, Brienne, offers to kind of finally be nice to him. I don't know why she has to be so mean to this dude all the time. It's fucked up. So she kind of, offers to instruct him in swordplay and all the rest, and horse riding and all of that. And that's cool. But there's this manipulation, like you said earlier, of Sansa by Littlefinger, in which she's trying to put her in a position to, it's hard to tell, I guess, at this point, what he's really trying to do, because he's whispering in one ear, like, you're a Stark and you're in Winterfell and the North remembers and all these kinds of things that she learns. But then on the other hand, it's like, well, you're going to be with the Boltons and you'll legitimize the marriage by being the wardeness of the North, and they're not very well liked. And so this will kind of soften the blow. And one of the cool things we get is we don't see her yet, but the little girl Mormont character, who's amazing. We get a letter from her in this season, which is awesome, being like, I don't, to Bolton or whatever, being like, I don't recognize anyone that's not a Stark or whatever like that. And I was hoping she would show up. I didn't remember if she showed up in the season, because I'm like, that character just fucking rules. Bella Ramsey, I think, plays that character.
She's like 10.
It's dope. It's a dope idea.
So
not only is it a dope idea that she's a little girl, but it's a dope idea that they like she's respected. Like she's sitting there with all, and we'll see it next season, but she's like sitting there with all those men and they're listening to her, and it's awesome. Dope. It's totally dope. I love it. Love it. So talk to me a little bit about how you feel about what's going on with Sansa and the Boltons and Winterfell kind of being under this occupation. She goes home. She meets the woman that tells her the North remembers in her bedroom, and then she's flayed for doing so because Reek gives her up. Very weird stuff. Also, the interactions again for the first time since season 1 of Theon and Sansa. So it's another example of characters coming together, and of course her interactions with the Boltons, Littlefinger's interaction with the Boltons. A lot of that kind of finally crossing over. So talk to me a little bit about how you feel about this.
Yeah, I mean, Littlefinger's on this campaign, right, to align himself with everybody. He's smoothing things over with the Lannisters. Then he's on his way to the Vale. He sort of aligns himself with one of the most important key militaries in the land and marrying the Lady of the Vale, and then she dies, so he doesn't have to have any attachments, but now he's politically connected and militarily connected to that army, and which, you know, hence his interest in Robin the Weakling. And then his next move is to sort of wed Sansa to Ramsay Bolton and secure, really, in not so many words, secure his own place in the North and sort of draw up these allegiances. So he's sort of slowly taking out any idea of an enemy and just completely unapologetically throwing Sansa into the lion's den and marrying her off to this monster in Ramsay Bolton. And you're just wondering, again, we talked about this in season 3, season 4, since the beginning, really. Where is it going to end for Sansa? Where is the misery, the suffering, running afoul of the most hideous people in the land? Where is this? How is this going to finally end for her? It's almost to the point of comedy, and it gets to such a degree that you almost don't even feel bad for her anymore. It's terrible to say, but it's just like, wow, like, can she not help herself? And then being reunited with Theon and her taking exception to everything. But one key piece of information she does find out is that Bran and Rickon are alive, which she doesn't know. So again, just those little character cross-ups where we get new information or a character learns something that they previously didn't know. There's a lot of that in this season. And you know, we get Reek finally returning to some sense of Theon by the end of the season in whisking Sansa away to safety, jumping in the snowbank off the wall after they kill Ramsay's girl.
Yep.
And
yeah, brutal death. I didn't remember that death scene. I was like, ooh.
Oh, that was brutal. It was so even hard to
like
watch.
A watermelon. Yeah.
Oh man.
But yeah, you know that. But that's another example, Dig, of the show just moving too quickly. Like Theon goes from Reek to this shadow of Theon too quickly. Because remember, like the next time he tells Bolton,
it's true.
Well, he tells Ramsay Bolton that Sansa is talking to this woman or this bubbling resistance, and they flare, like I said. But it's not until the next time that Sansa sees Theon that she's like, "You told on me. Why did you do that?" And it's at that moment that Theon becomes himself again. It's too quick. I doubt it happened like that in the books. I doubt it. It's like
a light bulb moment.
Yeah, because Theon's character's annoying, but that character's played very convincingly, and it's total torture. Like it's incredible. The Boltons are nuts. What I love about the Boltons is that Lord Bolton sees in Ramsay just this flowering chaos that he just tries to harness and take advantage of. He almost, you could tell he like knows he's crazy and looks at him, but he's even hesitant to kind of correct him in the moment. Like when he tells him later on, like, you embarrass yourself at dinner, but he doesn't tell him in the moment. He doesn't try to embarrass him. And I don't know. And even the way Ramsay talks to him is like, how did you find, like when he's like, how did you find it, when he's talking about having sex with his fat wife, and how do they know that she's pregnant? And I love that, by the way. I love that Bolton married her because the dowry was her weight in silver, which is fucking
that is amazing. That is so
because I think it goes that Walder Frey says, like, you can have any one of my daughters and I'll pay you their weight in silver. So he picks like the obese one.
That is I don't know if I realized that.
So that's like, yeah, so that's the reason.
Wow.
And I like watching those characters. They're dark, man. It's like almost their whole flayed man thing, their sigil, Winterfell itself being this treeless, plantless, lifeless place. Like it just has this whole horror vibe with them. Like they're well placed there.
Definitely. And we know the Northerners to be good guys in the first few seasons. So it's nice to flip the script and show the different dimensions of the different houses. And Roose Bolton is interesting because he's low, but he has some political skills. It's not just military. It's not just advising, whatever he did with Rob and all that kind of thing. But Ramsay has none of that. Ramsay is a wild card, and he is chaos. I like you saying that. And Roose knows just how to leverage that. You know, where you know, he says to his dad, like, I'm just going to give me 20 good men. They completely sabotage Stannis' whole camp overnight. He has the skill set. It's fueled by the insanity, but he has the skill set to back up his shit. That's what makes Ramsay so scary.
Why didn't they show that more, by the way? Again,
I know. That was very rushed.
Yeah.
That was, in fact, confusing. It went so quick.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, why is everything on fire? What happened?
Like, this is so important. Like, Stannis is basically like, he loses that, like, at that moment, he's lost.
Takes him out of the fight.
Like, it's even worse than Blackwater because, like, he really has nothing left at this point. And they just go by it like that. Very strange.
My God. That's true. Yeah, very quick. It's a lot, cramming in a lot.
Yeah.
Trying to cram in a lot in 10 hours. All
right. Well, we haven't gotten to Dorne yet. And Andres wrote in and said, this season is where the divergences from the books really start to negatively affect the quality. Now, again, I want to remind everyone, for people that don't know, we've not read the books, so we have no idea what's going on here. He says, the entire story in Dorne is nonsensical. A one-handed Jaime sent on a mission to save Myrcella based on one piece of intel, no horses, no ships, and no backup besides Bronn, who even says it's a stupid plan, absurd. So I guess maybe this isn't even in the books at all. I have no idea. This was a little strange to me just because I don't really give a shit about the widow character very much. Like, we don't really know her. I don't know why Dorne is really relevant. We hear a lot about Dorne and their alliance and getting someone back on the council, which they do. I do like that Doran is like this interesting, he's like disabled in some way.
Yeah.
King, and his brother was Oberyn.
Yes.
And his wife obviously is mad about this entire situation, but he wants peace. It is cool to see like a dove king, kind of. We don't really see that anywhere else, but he's like, I don't want bloodshed. I don't want war. And Dorne kind of gives off that vibe, of that bohemian libertarian vibe. They actually say at one point,
definitely,
even I think someone says to Jaime, like, we wouldn't judge you here for like what you were doing with your sister.
Sure.
So it's like a totally looser, different kind of place with different mores. But it does seem weird because Myrcella, I like that we get to see her again and she dies, which is unfortunate, but which I forgot about. I totally forgot that. I was like, what happens with her? Because I didn't remember her being integrated back into King's Landing. So I'm like, what happens? And then I was she never even gets back at all. So that's why I don't remember that.
Know.
But it does seem like kind of a waste when you consider how Jaime's a great character, Bronn's a great character, their relationship's great. And it's fun to see him with that girl at his castle, and he's just like kind of trying to enjoy the time and all of that. He's a great actor, great performances. But again, with all of this crammed into 10 hours or less, it just seems like such a waste to even do that at all when we have so many other demands that the plot is making at this point. And it does seem unusual. Like, and that is a rushed thing too. They get attacked by guards, they fight, then they are, next time we see them, they're in their outfits. Then the next time we see them, they're in the water gardens. So like, and they talk about this place as being like the inner sanctum of the capital, like where they refer to in earlier seasons when they're in King's Landing of their gardens and comparing the two gardens and all of those things. And so it just is like, how did this even happen? And then they're in prison, and then there are these three daughters that he had, and I do dig that they all use these different weapons. It's very cool, very video game-ish, but I just feel like it's a huge distraction all surrounding this wife character that I don't really care about. The last time we should have ever seen her is when she's screaming in agony in season 4. That's dope. That would have been the last time you would have reasonably wanted to see her.
Sure.
This whole revenge thing on them, like the revenge thing doesn't resonate because it might be better in the books, but we don't really understand the beef between these two families. Like we know that there's like, there was these killings and these murders and all of this. Like we learn with the Mountain and Oberyn and kind of the exposition around that fight. But I don't know. What do you think about this side arc?
Yeah, it's strange. This is the one that really from the outset of the season kind of not rubbed me the wrong way, but really struck me as odd. You have this washed up one-handed knight, and along with one other warrior, a proper warrior. I mean, Bronn's he's a great fighter, but these two guys are going to invade a country Like it's a country. Like Dorne's a country with an army. You know, they have a peaceable king who wisely doesn't want war with the Lannisters, but the one thing that propels this caper, right, for Dorne and Jaime, for Bronn and Jaime, is it's kind of done at Cersei's behest. And it does show the sway and the influence that Cersei has over Jaime, because it does demonstrate that there is nothing this guy won't do that she says to do. And that is the whole reason he undertakes this mission. It's a suicide mission by all looks, right? And they're going to go and rescue the daughter from this country, just the two of them. Again, one basically can't fight. So Bronn would be doing it all by himself.
In fact, the black guard, I guess the main guard of the King. I like that line when he's like, "There would have been a good fight when you had two hands or whatever."
That's good shit.
It was good. It was cool.
And again, Jaime's reputation of the way it was, the way we were. But I like the fact that they're getting these threats from Dorne, and they don't know it's not the royal family sending the threats. It's this little subset of this deadly Viper assassination squad. Actually, that's a different movie. But the Sand Snakes and Ellaria Sand, Oberyn's paramour, they're the ones at the center of this threat. They're the ones who want to avenge Oberyn's death. It's not Doran, and it's not coming from him. It's coming from this small rebellious subset of these people in Dorne. And I think that is interesting. And the Ellaria Sand character is interesting. And I understand why her and her daughters want revenge for the man that they loved in Oberyn. But I'm with you, I think. I think it would have been a proper ending to see the mountain crush Oberyn's face and then see her screaming in anguish and then sort of end it with that. You know, I know that Cersei lost everybody, lost Joffrey, lost Tywin. Now it's down to Tommen and Myrcella. And there's this desperation. Like, I got to get my kid back. They're threatening them. And she was worried with good reason. I mean, Ellaria wanted to send Myrcella back to King's Landing finger by finger. I mean, you know, Cersei had the right instinct there. But to send two people in and then for it to actually work out, it's almost very comedic. I mean, I like that Lethal Weapon-esque fun action duo thing with Jaime and Bronn's becoming this gentleman and this nobleman, and he's got Stokeworth and he's marrying into a fortune, or he's trying to marry into this fortune. And there's a lot of funny stuff behind these two characters. Jaime's trying to adjust to his new role without having the fighting skill to back it up. And so there's a lot of fun things, but to send them on this mission, it's almost zany and comedic. It almost feels like, I don't know, it almost feels like a Blazing Saddles type thing. It just tonally, it doesn't really work. There were probably other ways to get Myrcella back into the fold, or if that was going to culminate in a tragedy with her being poisoned in Jaime's arms after, I like that moment of Jaime and her coming to this understanding of her saying, now as a young lady, I know you're my dad and I think it's awesome. And then in the next breath, she's dying in his arms. It's very tragic and very unexpected. I remember the first time being like, oh shit, like they got her, like they killed her anyway. And you really do wonder now, is that going to spark anything between Dorne and the Lannisters? And I don't think it does.
Yeah, the Lannisters
because
are
I think what
weak.
happens
They're
is
weak.
the White Walkers, right? That whole thing comes to a head, so nothing else is important anymore. But yeah, it's a funny arc. It really is.
The Lannisters are weak too. Like, I don't know at this point. They're greatly weakened. They say, as we said earlier, with Tywin dying, multiple people know, like, no, we don't give a fuck about them anymore. I think it's Bolton himself that says that when they're like, we made a deal, when Littlefinger's trying to bribe them, and he's basically like, you made a deal with the Lannisters, and he's like, I don't give a fuck about the Lannisters.
Right.
The Lannisters, anymore. And that's interesting. And it was all through, right, that all through that character of Tywin, which I think is fascinating. We haven't yet talked about Arya, who has a really big role in this season, so we should. Logan.eth wrote in and said, brothers of the Knocked Watch, what the actual fuck is up with the many-faced god and the faceless men? We see the House of Black and White in this season, and as much as I love all of Game of Thrones, this is absolutely the aspect I wish was fleshed out more. well, I love how little we know and how mysterious it is. How do we not get more many-faced God in this story? The Lord of Light has a lot of mention throughout the story, even outside of Westeros, and it's definitely interesting how the multiple religious really get screen time in season 5. But what the fuck is going on in Bravos? The reason I think this is because their religion really has nothing to do with what's going on over there, while the Melisandre and others are like at the center of this
Sure.
entire saga. So I think that in itself kind of answers the question. However, it is cool to see this house, like see her kind of cash in this coin that she gets earlier on from the Jaqen character, and how she goes through these rigors and this randomness of washing these bodies and sweeping floors and doing all these things, watching people kind of get assassinated in front of them by drinking this water. And then you realize that they're kind of taking the bodies into the sanctum where they can utilize this skill. And I love how Arya is unable to let go of herself. That scene where she buries the sword that Jon gave her
Yeah.
is cool, like, because the
shit.
requirement of being in this sector, in this cult or whatever, is that like you kind of have to be no one anymore. And she learns that over time, but she can't let go of her past. And so Jaqen tells her over and over again, like, you know, the girl is not ready and all these different things. And she ends up, as I said earlier in the episode, kills Marin Trant, who's one of her targets. And that scene
Oh my
is
God.
awesome. How you find out he's kind of like a pedophile and all of these different things, really interesting. And he keeps saying like younger, and
They make you really hate him before he's taken out.
yeah, like, and he plays a good role. The brothel keeper's even kind of put off and disgusted by him, and you imagine the things that they see. Maybe it's not as sophisticated as the brothels, obviously, and that Littlefinger ran in, where maybe his pleasures were catered to more easily. But and he says something like, "Bring me a fresh girl tomorrow" or something too. It's like, holy mother of God,
so crazy.
So yeah, talk to me a little bit about Arya's arc and how you feel about her in season 5.
I mean, I get so frustrated for her in the season because she spends a good deal of the season doing her best Karate Kid, wax on, wax
Definitely.
off, paint the fence routine as she waits for the Jaqen and the Faceless Men to actually start her elite assassin training. But I like the whole philosophy at the center of this religion and sort of dedicating yourself to this many-faced God is that you have to shed all your possessions and everything that makes you an individual. And that is the discipline. And that's harsh. So to be able to achieve that mindset, and really, I guess for Arya's point of view specifically, she's doing it really, the goal is revenge. She wants to be able to develop these skills to go and murder everybody that's wronged her, right? But I don't know what other reason you would dedicate yourself to the House of Black and White or the Faceless Men. What other thing could there be at the center of that? Why would you want to abandon your whole self? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
Is that everybody's goal in the House of Black and White? There's so much proper Bravos mystery at the center of this whole House of Black and White thing. And that's what makes me fascinated with Bravos in particular, the dancing masters and the water sword technique and all. There's so many the coin and the speak. There's so many interesting things about Bravos, and that's the thing. She kind of runs afoul. She kind of rushes things. Sir Meryn is there with Mace Tyrell, and they're on this mission for the Iron Bank, and Arya gets wind of that and sort of sets the wheels in motion too early and ends up murdering him brutally. And then they, in return for that undisciplined move, they turn around and take her eyesight. So we find out it's very scary what Arya's involved herself in. She has righteous motivations, but we're worried for her by the time this season ends because she's dedicating herself to this religion and it might not go right.
Yeah, I agree. It's cool to have consequences there. And she had to buy in. Like, she went to them. She went through all of these troubles. Like, they gave her a million ways out. So you almost can't feel bad for her when she broke their protocol or went ahead of the game. Basically, sure. She wasn't able to justify that. And so, like, you can't feel too bad for her because she did buy in. It's so interesting how the psychological component of Arya and like what she's been through and what she's trying to escape, and she wants to be someone else, but she can't be someone else. Watching her play that oyster saleswoman or whatever, it was interesting. Like just kind of playing like a woman, like a young girl again, as opposed to being kind of in hiding or on the run.
Yeah.
Interesting. Dig, one character I want to talk about before I forget is Qyburn. I like this character a lot. I mean, he's obviously evil and nefarious. We discussed him on a previous episode and just the Nazi doctor type vibe he gives off, but this experimenter, and he lost his chains from the as a meister, and he's kind of just working outside of the realm of official science, but is still doing his experiments. And it's interesting. We see him first when the uncle calls them all sycophants or whatever. He's revealed as the new master of whisperers to replace Varys, I guess. And I like that at the end of the season, like there's a few cool scenes. There's only a few scenes really with Qyburn. And I like the scene where he's like ordered to write a letter on a raven and send it out. And he's working on the mountain. You don't really know that yet, I guess, or you're not supposed to know that yet. But then the mountain like kind of like moves on the table and he's like, relax, friend, or whatever, all that kind of stuff. And then the very end of the season, post Cersei Walk of Shame, which we already discussed, we meet the mountain, Qyburn's kind of creation of reviving this guy, and he took a vow of silence until all of your enemies are vanquished, or whatever he says. Pretty
shit.
Interesting. I like this character a lot. I think this character is super interesting, and it's intriguing to know, or to not know, like not remember really like what happens with him, because he's such a silent gray character that has a lot of intrigue in a cast that's full of intrigue, I think.
Yeah, he's fun. He's really fun. I mean, this is Cersei's biggest ally now. This is a character who really dedicated himself and aligned himself with Cersei. Her biggest ally, this disgraced Meister, definitely not sanctioned by the Citadel. It's sort of this Dr. Frankenstein type. Not just because of what he's doing with Gregor with the mountain, but because of just everything he seems to be involved with. And the exception that Grand Maester Pycelle takes to him being around, and even he's the liaison that comes to see Cersei in the cell before she's let free for her atonement walk, and he's really the one at her side now, and creates basically this super knight zombie thing to protect Cersei. Cersei has like a proper robot knight monster now, and so she's got a Frankenstein's monster and a Dr. Frankenstein. It's a really interesting dynamic. And I remember back to meeting this character in Harrenhal, I guess it was, where they kind of recruited him, Jaime and Brienne, and maybe was Cat Stark at the center of things back then. I'm not even sure. But it's interesting what they did with the character and how he just draws up with Cersei. And I don't know, without him, she might be lost at this point. A very key ally for Cersei now.
Yeah, for sure. I'm intrigued, not remembering where exactly he goes to keep going. We brought up Jorah earlier, and we should talk about his kind of re-entry into the story as well. Sees his Tyrion. It's kind of predictable. Tyrion's with Varys, and he's drunk, and he wants to get out of the carriage and all the rest. And they finally go to a brothel, and you just know something's going to happen while he's there. And Jorah shows back up. What's interesting after this kidnapping, first of all, it's funny as hell. There's a couple of scenes where Jorah basically just throws Tyrion, like just throws him like in the boat, like just as if he's an object.
He really does.
And not a person. And their dialogue, although there's not much back and forth, I mean, the dialogue from Tyrion's really interesting. You learn a little bit more about Jorah just through the exposition. But ultimately, he finds his way back to Meereen and surrounding environs. Well, first they're found by slavers. And again, this happens so quickly. Like
it does.
It's just so quick. I don't understand. Like they're slaves one minute and they're sold to this random guy, and then the guy just lets them fight, and so lets them. It's like total. Why is it going so quickly? So that's frustrating. But they are nonetheless together, and I guess grow some sort of camaraderie with each other. Although the big thing is that when they're attacked outside of this mysterious, and I don't know much about it. I wrote it down here. I guess they're outside of Valeria, and it's like kind of run down Roman-like city, and they talk about something called the Doom. I don't know if you caught that, but that's where they get attacked by the Stone Men, and I don't know if the Doom has to do with the Stone Men or whatever, but he is nonetheless infected. He, being Jorah, is infected by the Stone Men, which we know throughout the rest of the season, and it's getting worse and progressing. Speaking of the Stone Men, we also learn about Stannis' daughter and how they kind of put an end to that. It was we mentioned a couple episodes, kind of more curiosity about what was going on with this. They call it grayscale.
Right.
So we know now, and I just didn't remember if they got into that. So anyway, talk to me a little bit about Jorah and that whole arc, if it interests you.
Yeah, he has an interesting adventure over the course of the season. He's banished by, of course, by Daenerys, and then sort of tries to get back. You cobble some plans together to get back into her good graces. Notices Tyrion and Volantis when Tyrion got out of that cart. Man, you shouldn't have got out of that wagon. And takes him, and the plan is to offer Tyrion up to Daenerys to get back in her good graces. And then, of course, like that doesn't work, and then becomes part of this slaver fighting pit thing and has to basically save Daenerys. The second time he's ushered into Marine during the course of the season, has to save Daenerys by one of the Sons of the Harpy throws a spear through him. And that's how he finally gets back into good graces. But I love, a lot happens to him. He goes through these adventures, contracts grayscale. I like the thawing that slowly happens in the season between Tyrion and Jorah, though. I think that's kind of cool. They grow to have because they're very different characters. And they basically start out as enemies, and rightly so. But there's an understanding and a thawing that develops between the two characters that I like. Sort of ends a little contentious with the two towards the end of the season, but I like that kind of journey of them going on an adventure together and just being forced into having some sort of understanding of each other, which was kind of one of the things this show does really well. And it'll be interesting to see now with Jorah and Daario setting out to find Daenerys and Drogon how it goes, because I really don't remember. I don't remember how season 6 even starts.
Yeah, me neither. It's exciting. It's
right?
interesting. Yeah, we'll get back into it soon, so I'll watch
Yeah.
it in earnest. But yeah, it's I feel like again this moves too quickly. Although it's cool that they dedicate more time to Daenerys this season. As we said earlier, I think it's more welcome this season than it's been in the past. What's fascinating for me watching her is that the jockeying and the palace intrigue surrounding her is, I think, most transparent compared to everyone else. So we get to see it the most, as everyone kind of, with Barristan dying and Grey Worm injured and all these different people just kind of coming and going by her side. But it's again, it happens so quickly because though we know that Tyrion wants to become an advisor or kind of help Daenerys and maybe exact some revenge on his family as well back in Westeros, it's like she just kind of adopts him as an advisor pretty quickly. It needed more time. Everything needs more time to breathe. It's good, but it needs more time to breathe.
Yeah, Tyrion really, I mean, if you really think about what happens in the season with Tyrion coming into the fold with Daenerys and her camp, they really do put a lot of trust in Tyrion. I mean, Tyrion could be coming as a complete spy from King's Landing, or the Lannisters. So they really do put a lot of trust. Daenerys especially puts a lot of trust in the Tyrion and sort of welcomes him into the fold pretty rapidly. And it's one of those things where there was like no vetting process, really. They were just like, all right, I guess you're our friend now, type of thing. And,
presumably they would at least know that they say that they're looking for Tyrion is wanted. So they must know that he killed Tywin. So at the very least,
that's true.
They know that, like, well, he did that. I mean, he could be working for someone else, but maybe there is that.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's a good point. And, he's very charismatic too. And I think there's a lot of humanity with Tyrion, even though he could be funny and he could be, he could be clever and all of those things. There is something trustworthy and sincere about him and authentic. So I think that, he has that going for him too. And I think he also has a little bit of a death wish. I think he's kind of half hoping she banishes him or assassinates him in the beginning, because he has that long-standing feeling of just that depression and the sadness and just overwhelmed by everything that's happened. He's not himself. He finds out he still wants to drink, but even in the brothel, he kind of discovers, like, I'm not feeling this thing with the whores and stuff like that. He's changing. There's a change coming over Tyrion, and it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see where it goes for him now.
Yeah, I think part of the compelling aura around him is this idea that he just plays the odds over and over again and he wins. And
yes,
you kind of get that vibe when he's dealing with the slavers, in which he's like, I was a fighter and I did all these things and blah, blah. But again, it doesn't feel like it's very well developed. It just feels like it's too rushed, because you would have imagined he could have gotten to that point, but maybe like play it out a little bit. and let us.
He does survive by the skin of his teeth. He's almost killed by the slavers at first. Then he's sold. Jorah is sold, and he's almost left without Jorah. But a lot happens in a short time. But I like Tyrion's desperation through it all. He seems very, very like a lot. He knows a lot at stake, and it's hair trigger. Like his fortunes could turn on a dime, and he knows it, and he acts like that this season, which I think is really cool. There's a big sense of urgency that makes you nervous to watch it. It's like, how is he going to stay with Jorah? How is he going to end up with Daenerys? It almost goes wrong so many times, but it is, again, that pace and that rhythm. It does feel a little rushed.
Yeah, and I will say that I do like seeing him in combat. Like, there are a lot of characters it's fun to see in combat. I really like seeing Stannis fight and others where not that Tyrion's talking a big game, but it's fun to see him in combat when necessary. I think, as far as I know, he's killed 3 people so far, and in the arena he kills a person with a dagger, and he's like willing to defend himself. So I like that he's not like a shrinking violet, even though his stature would suggest that he should be. Think of all the things he's been through.
He's
just physically, his entire he is. He's very courageous, and I think it's really neat. We haven't really gone to Jon Snow yet as far as his status with the Night's Watch, and of course the way the show ends, or the season ends, with him being stabbed to death, or so one assumes. But he's voted by the skin of his teeth as the 998th Lord Commander, as they say. And we find out that Master Aemon has been there for 10 of them, which is so fascinating. And I love the scene with him, and he's dying, and he's talking about his past as a Targaryen, and you kind of forget about all of that as well.
Good shit.
I kind of was bummed. I forgot about the whole stabbing scene, and I was bummed because I was like, it feels like people are kind of coming around to him. At one point, the old Lord Commander says to him something along the lines of like, you have a good heart, and it's going to get us all killed or whatever.
Yeah.
But seem to acknowledge like something decent in him, but nonetheless, when he tries to, I guess, do right by the wildlings, which is, I understand everyone's skepticism, especially, with Ollie kind of laying the last blow and all of that, seeing what happened to his family.
Sure.
You kind of understand that, but
absolutely,
Jon kind of lays out to them for the first time, and they see it themselves at Hardhome, at the Battle of Hardhome, which is, these people will either become undead soldiers, or they can come on our side and maybe have a chance. We can have a better chance. In other words, it's not like a zero-sum game. In fact, like, every person you don't bring over the wall is going to turn into one of those creatures.
Absolutely.
And
yep.
They don't really strike that at home until this season as making it a thing. It's like, this is not some sort of binary choice. Like, we must remove their bodies, basically, and get them on the other side of the wall. And we see that a wall can be effective at Hardhome when the avalanche looking thing comes in, and dude, I love that scene when they're at the door and the gate, and everyone's like banging on the gate trying to get in, and then they all just retreat away from the gate, and the shadows go away, and it's like, it's just so creepy. But anyway,
so eerie.
What do you have to say about what's going on at the wall and beyond?
Yeah, Jon Snow, like you said, he gets the Lord Commander role at the skin of his teeth with Grand Maester Aemon's vote, pushes it over the top, and just beats out Alistair Thorne. The whole thing with Jon and Alistair Thorne, I find myself really longing for Alistair Thorne's respect. I think he acknowledges Jon's leadership. I think he acknowledges the kids' fighting prowess and everything like that. But there's such a vile sort of hatred for Jon at the heart of things. And you're just hoping for that to thaw. Like, you're hoping for that ice to melt. And it's the one thing I was pining for this whole season, is like, is Alistair and Jon, can they come to some sort of agreement?
And they almost seem to, because
allies.
He almost seems to, because he makes him first ranger and all of that. And
yeah, Jon is always gracious.
Right.
But you never see it wash the other way with Alistair. And then, of course, it culminates the way it culminates at the end of the season. But I like, when they come with this battle, the wildlings, that little faction of the Night's Watch and Jon, they come to Hardhome to fight the dead, and it really makes you realize what they're up against now. It's a proper battle, and the Night King is there, and he does what he does, but Jon squares off against one of the Night King's lieutenants, and that battle in itself almost gets Jon killed. I mean, thank God he had the Valyrian steel sword, or he would have been finished, or have some dragon glass or whatever. But it only makes you realize, oh my God, the Night King is no joke. And then, of course, you see as they're floating away in that lifeboat, Jon and the last remnants of their survivors, he raises his hand and resurrects all the dead. So now they know, all their suspicions are confirmed. They're fighting this foe that's unbeatable, essentially. And it's horrifying. And, they have a giant and they have all these weapons and they're fighting for their lives and scraping with everything they have, but they barely make it out of there. And a lot of them don't make it out of there. So now you really know what they're up against. And then, of course, you're dealing with the tension of those wildlings being promised refuge behind the wall. And is Alistair and his cronies going to let them in? And you don't know there for a second. And then, of course, he does. And then tragedy. I don't remember this ending, what happens with Jon. I did not remember this at all. I think I remember what happens to get back to the living, because somebody shows up right in time for around the same time Jon comes back with the wildlings. But man, that whole traitor thing, that whole moment, dude, is so brutal. He's murdered by like 10 of his brothers, including Ollie, who's like his steward.
Yeah.
So, yeah, dude, and that answers the question about Alistair. What side is he going to come down on? He's the first one to plunge the dagger in. Wow, what a moment. I really forgot about this. It was a shock to see it again.
Yeah, it's hard because on one hand, you can, as I said, you can understand where they're coming from. Like, oh, like I said, he's the 998th Lord Commander. It's like, who the fuck are you, dude? Like, we don't deal with the wildlings. We don't do things this way. Like, you can understand. We have all of this insight that they don't have, and also we are lacking all of the context that they would have. And so, I'm not a violent person, but it's like maybe I would have been one of the people stabbing him in too. It's like, dude, we fucking hate these motherfuckers. Like, and also we don't. Although you can't. I was gonna say, like, we don't understand we don't understand the ramifications of not letting them on the other side of the wall, but in fact, at that point, they do. So you can't really say that, but it is hard because Jon is a good person. It's just, these are dark times. And I love the hard home scene for a lot of different reasons, because we meet some cool factions, like some characters that seem like they're going to introduce, like that woman chieftain,
Sure.
You feel like, oh, this is going to become like a character. And then they wipe them all out. And there are a few things I want to say about Hardhome. First of all, I love that scene when the silhouetted scene of the four kings or whatever they are. I don't know, the leaders. So it's awesome. It reminds me a lot of that sweet silhouette scene of the enemies in Death Stranding, the PlayStation 4 game. And I love that. And I love how the enemies come over the hill and just fall and then wake up and I was kind of hoping, like, I would have done this a little differently. I don't know if it's like this in the book or whatever, but they stop at the water's edge, which I think is weird. And what I would have liked to have happened is, like, all of the people there just killed themselves, all going after them, even in the boats, like just going into the water and dying, like drowning and dying. And the White Walkers basically showing, like, we don't even need these people anyway. Like, and this is like, they're so ferocious. They're just going to chase you no matter what, even if it kills them. I would have liked that. Like, it felt a little weird that I like how he revives them all. It's sweet. But then it would have been cool if they all just ran at the water and basically all just committed suicide. And maybe just the leaders were left. I would have liked that visual.
Yeah, I can see that. Sure.
But I mean, it does show that they're trying to build their army and do all of the rest. I like the visual too of the giant walking into the water.
Oh, it's so good. He's going to make it all the way to the ships.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. Pretty neat. So yeah, I like that scene. I like those scenes, getting over there. And like, yeah, like you said, the proof's in the pudding now. There were a lot of different rumors about what works and what happens. And, oh, well, Samwell killed him with the obsidian and this and that, but like everyone saw him kill one of their lieutenants with the Valyrian steel. So now we know that works, and everyone saw them turn. So like you said, like the secret's out. It's not like it's not a series of rumors and murmurs anymore. And now it's reviving in everyone, I think, this idea of like, well, that's why we built this wall to begin with. And we've said throughout the different episodes that one of the fun things about the history of this fictional world is that it's been so long since there's been tragedy like this that no one even believes or understands perhaps why they even do this shit anymore. Like, we find out Stannis says that there are 19 castles on the wall, because he says at one point that they can staff all of them when I win or whatever. And only 2 of them have anyone in it. Like, no one takes it. You would think that it would be taken very seriously, but it's not. And that just reinforces it, which is pretty cool.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
And you know, at the center of this whole thing is not just this enemy, this undefeatable enemy, but again, like you said, the idea of having to come together with your lifelong enemies, you know, centuries in some cases of grudges and bad blood. And what is it going to take to form this alliance, and how hard that would actually be, you know, to embrace this new level of thinking, to unite against this common enemy and put aside your differences and years and tens of years and decades of animosity. It's really, I love that humanity being at the center of this conflict. And we're still wondering, like, what is it going to take? You know, some people in their wisdom know that that's an inevitability, and some people are just kind of clinging to the old ideas still. And how much longer would that last?
Yeah. One of the last things that I want to talk about anyway is Princess Shireen, which we had brought up earlier. And she's sacrificed the new sacrifice to the Lord of Light. She has the king's blood in her, and they cast some blood magic, I guess, to try to better their situation after the Boltons successfully sabotaged them. It's truly unbelievable. Like, actually the screaming is like so blood curdling. And I was imagining, obviously the mom commits suicide, but you can imagine thinking at that time, like, I'll never forget that scream of my daughter burning at a pyre because some crazy priestess told me to do it. But it shows again just how insane Stannis is. Just wanted to acknowledge that scene because I think it's a powerful scene, and it's important because Stannis loses a bunch of his men because of it.
Yeah,
like
half.
Yeah, and that's too much even for these guys that have fought alongside him. So it's a totally insane move that costs him everything. Like, he just goes too far. And I'm wondering if you have anything to add about Princess Shireen and that whole thing. It's sad, and as you said, that's why they send Davos away for sure.
Oh, I think so. Right, that has to be part of the strategy because Davos isn't having that. And you know, he's even advocating for Lady Baratheon and Shireen to be brought to safety before they invade Winterfell and everything like that. Yeah, Shireen the good, man. It's so sad to see the character who just wanted her dad's love, you know, and to be driven to such a frenzy to sacrifice her. Like, the only thing that was probably good in his life to be sacrificed, and everything coming to a head as a result of that. You know, Lady Baratheon finally waking up but killing herself, Stannis realizing he was wrong, 50% of the men abandoning Stannis, and then even the Red Priestess, you know, even Melisandre saw the errors in that it went too far and leaves as well because she knows what the fallout's going to be. It's so sad. And, you know, they don't pull any punches with the scene either. I mean, she's brought by a couple of soldiers to the funeral pyre, to the fire pit, and she's screaming for her dad, and the dad shows up and he knows, and that only adds insult to injury. It's really harsh. And one of the saddest things, because and Davos really loved her, and we love Davos. So that for us as an audience, we're like, oh man. And what is the reaction going to be when shit hits when he finds out?
Right.
Yeah.
He carves her that little stag.
Yeah.
That I think she carries with her to the fire, and so it becomes a
Yes.
flaming stag, which is
So
cool
sad,
visual.
dude.
Yeah, it is sad. The last thing that I wanted to talk about, and we can throw it over to you afterwards if there's anything we missed, is we have to talk about Bran, or the lack thereof. Quantum Radish wrote into us and said, "Good afternoon, Brothers M. After listening to last week's episode, I couldn't agree more about Bran's storyline in season 4. It was always a drag. Thankfully, he is completely removed from season 5. I actually didn't even notice this until my second viewing of the show." So yeah, he's conspicuously absent, and I don't mind it. It's not that I don't like Bran. I think he's a fine character. It's just in a season where things are too rushed, I couldn't even imagine if they dedicated the requisite hour or 45 minutes to him.
You would think, yeah.
I just feel like that would have just been a huge disservice to the rest of the story that I think is already deserved by the rapidity in which it moves. So that's obviously a choice. Like, I just couldn't imagine that the book just doesn't talk about Bran. And so I like this though, but it is important. I don't want to undercut what the importance of it. It's like Bran, if you care about the mythos going on with the White Walkers and what the hell's going on here and the First Men and the Andals and all this random ass shit, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like he's kind of the answer to that. But my thing is that I don't really need to know. That's not what makes it interesting. It's like this foreboding and unknown situation. In fact, Samwell's the one going into all the different books and wants to go to Old Town to become a Meister so he can start reading more. Like all the answers are there for them to discover. I don't know that we have to have like this very literal metaphysical experience with Bran to understand all that there is to understand about the enemies. And I know that is kind of the point, and I guess we'll get back there, but I don't know. I didn't miss it. I felt like it was fine being not there. And if they never brought it back, it would have been weird, but it would have been like, okay, well, we're fine with this. What do you think about Bran's absence?
Yeah, I mean, it is a little egregious to leave a main part out or a main path out for an entire season. So we haven't seen Bran and Hodor and them for 10 plus hours now. But I agree with you. Squeezing in another branching path would have been a bridge too far. It just would have been too much. And maybe it's forgivable. I mean, maybe we see Bran and his ilk pretty early in season 6 which would make it a little better. If they keep ignoring it for episode after episode, I'm not sure how well that works. But if you've seen the series before, you know Bran will play a big part. So he'll certainly be back with Hodor and Osha. That's the other thing. Osha and Recon and them they're two separate parties right now. So what's going on with them as well? We haven't tuned back in with that part of Bran's party either. So there is a lot to catch up on, but I think trying to wedge it in would have been too much.
Yeah, I agree. I think this was the right creative decision. And as we move into season 6, I guess we'll see how it all turns out. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't discuss?
No, I mean, Jon's death, right? How's that gonna pan out? I honestly don't remember, so I'm excited to see season 6. And then, of course, Daenerys captured by a big Dothraki horde.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Right?
That's right.
A Khal Drogo horde. I mean, a big
Dothraki. That's the name I was looking for. Yeah, I wrote Drogo-like riders.
Well, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And Drogon. You know, she's kind of hanging with Drogon when she's set upon by this Dothraki horde. And that's how it ends with her. So what's going to happen? And Daario and what's his name in search, right?
Oh, yeah, Jorah and Daario.
In search of her to go see if they could find their Khaleesi. And
of course, Loras and Marjorie in prison
still imprisoned.
The I was going to call him the Giant Sparrow, but that's not it. That's a studio, the game studio.
The High Sparrow.
And
Mr. Jonathan Pryce. And of course, as you said, I think you mentioned it, right, Kyle? Sam's off to the Citadel. Sam, Gilly, baby Sam.
Yep.
He's going to realize his potential as a Meister. He's going to stop pretending he's a warrior. He's going to do some good. And he does do some good. I do remember this character. Sam. Oh, Sam. It's so funny that both stories have a Sam.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think, yeah, man. I mean, and we lost Janos Slint, right? Jon assassinates him up at the wall. What did you make of that scene when Janos, we've known him from King's Landing, Tyrion is the one who banished him there in the first place.
Yeah, he sucks.
Terrible character, hateable, detestable.
Yeah, I guess played.
He's begging for his life.
Right.
Begging for mercy. Could Jon just not stomach the cowardice? Or was that anger?
I think it was, I invoked, everything about it invoked the scene very early in season 1 when Ned executes that dude just in the middle of the field. Do you remember that? And they're all on horses. I feel like, and he says something, I think, to them at that point, like, you got to do what you got to do kind of shit. And I think he was kind of trying to just understand that they had to do what they had to do.
You got to be.
I thought it was interesting that Janos says something along the lines of "I've always been scared," and that's
he pushes it real far.
That's a real powerful line, you know.
Yeah.
And dies like a coward, which is why you just don't want to die like that, you know. Like,
why would he even push it?
It's sad in a way because it's like, I've always been scared. It's like, yeah, I'm sure you have been, dude. But it's interesting. Yeah, he refuses to go to that castle. So yeah, that's an interesting scene, but I think shows Jon Snow's not. You would expect. We all expected Jon Snow was going to not kill him, right?
Yes.
So maybe that's part of it.
Be merciful,
right?
And he doesn't.
So there's a component of that.
Stannis likes it. Stannis is like, yeah.
Yeah, oh my God, Stannis loves it. He has no idea what's going on, but he loves it. All right. Well, we'll get into season 6 in the coming weeks. I'm looking forward to it. I think at this point, I think season 6 is 10 episodes, but I think 7 and 8 are not 10 episodes. So these are
Eight's
actually
definitely not.
Yeah, I think
I don't
8 was
remember
like
7.
7. This is when they start making things up, I think. So not that it's all made up, but it would be interesting. By the way, I mean, we can kind of cap with this. It's time stamping us a little bit, but did you see the trailer or any of the stuff for the House of Dragons spinoff?
I have.
Yeah.
Yes.
What do you think of that?
It's too early to judge. I don't know. I
Yeah.
like the way the Targaryens look. It's everything we heard with the golden blonde hair, and they seem to have a very distinctive aesthetic to that house. And I like that there's, they show the other houses, and whether it's, I think it's Valeria, right? That one of the other key houses back then. It was different then.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Because we see Valeria abandoned in
Yes,
this season.
but they were at the height of their power then.
Right. Yeah,
So
I'm
it's
so curious
interesting.
about that. Like, I'm so curious what happened there. They use that term, the Doom. I don't know if that's like the Stone Men, because the Stone
was
Men
that
are there.
grayscale?
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
Good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
What do you think? How do you think it looks so far?
It looks cool. Yeah, I think it's too early to tell. I implicitly just trust everything HBO does. Not everything that they do is for me, but it's always of a very high quality. They very typically miss, and I don't think that they really run anything into the ground, or they tend to treat things with a little bit more care. I mean, look at what they could have done with The Sopranos all these years. Look what they could have done with shows like Oz or The Wire or whatever. Even stuff like, I don't know if they could command them to come back in any way. Financially, I'm sure they could, but even True Detective, right? Season 1, I know that there's like some stuff with season 3. Didn't see any of that, but connecting it, but
it was pretty good.
But I just don't think that they ever really push things too far, or very, very rarely do. So if they feel like there's a story here worth exploring, I think that's cool. I just think it's frustrating for a lot of people with this percolating, with Elden Ring having just come out. It's like George Martin is doing all these things except finishing his books. And it is funny, but I understand people being like, what are you doing, dude? Like, I think there are a lot of people, I think, that expect that he has basically embraced this idea that I think happened to the Wheel of Time and some other book series where he's not going to finish it. Like someone else.
See, that would be tragic.
But I guess other authors have finished a couple of these long running series and it's been good. And maybe he can even be giving them instructions or whatever. But I want to see, I think a lot of people are eager, especially as we get into this more nebulous made up space, as it were. Like, what are your intentions here? Like, what didn't we get? You kind of screwed us out of it. But it's the George Lucas conundrum where it's like, well, this came from your mind. I mean, we wouldn't have it without you. So it's hard to be too mad at you. Sure. But you kind of dropped the ball. I mean, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know, like, even if you had ghostwriters do it at this point, I don't know what you think you're doing. That's my whole thing is I don't know what you think you're doing. Like, what, as a creator and you're a free man, and I know he just wants to do his own thing, but don't say that the money and the situation can't change a person, because I think a lot of that happened to him, and I think
that's a big part of the equation. It's true. I think you're right, Kyle. I think it's complicated when it comes to something like this, because you take the hunger out of the equation, right? He's certainly not a hungry man, and I'm not making fat jokes, but
no, I agree. Yeah.
Extremely successful and will set for life already. So, what's the motivation? And I think there's a lot of that, perhaps fearing messing up the books, like everybody thinks the show is messed up with season 8, and sort of living with the shadow of that, the dark cloud hanging over your head for that potential. I don't know. I mean, there's probably a lot to it, but it would really be tragic if he went to his grave someday and didn't fit. Because what does he have? 2 left?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
and I think he has released like some chapters from one of these books.
Weird.
You know what? Hold on
strange.
a second. Game of Thrones books wiki. A Game of Thrones is the novel for followed by a Clash of Kings series, A Song of Fire and Ice. Okay, so there's some spoilers in here. I gotta see. Gotta move quick. Okay, so Game of Thrones was the first book that was 96. Then Clash of Kings was 99. Storm of Swords was 2000. Feast for Crows was 2005. Dance with Dragons, which was this last one, was 2011. So that was before the show even came out. And then The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring are the next ones. And they both are unreleased. The Winds of Winter.
Wow. It's longer than I thought. 96 it started?
It says in April of 2011, shortly before the publication of A Dance with Dragons, which took him 6 years to write, Martin hoped that the last 2 books would go a little quicker than this one and estimated it would take 3 years to finish the next one at a good pace. In October 2012, 400 pages of the 6th novel had been written. In 2013, he had written a quarter of the book. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, it just goes on and on. There's like thousands of words about these.
It's known. That's common. That's public information.
He says in an interview published in January 2020, Martin said that while he was still working on The Winds of Winter, his primary focus, he also continues working on a TV adaptation of the science fiction novel Who Fears Death, for which he agreed to be the executive producer in 2017. Oh. In March and April of 2020, Martin stated that he was writing The Winds of Winter every day. In February 2021, Martin said he had written hundreds and hundreds of pages of The Winds of Winter in 2020, but that even though it had been the most productive year with regards to The Winds of Winter, he still had hundreds of pages to write. Although he was hopeful of finishing in 2021, he did not want to make any predictions. In March 2022, Martin stated that he had made less progress in 2021 than in 2020, but emphasized that less is not none. It's like, oh my God.
Well, he's giving us time to catch up. Maybe he's doing it for us too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I am excited to read it, but it is.
I really do want to read them. I honestly do.
He's still writing some other stuff, I guess. I don't know, man. And like I said, he wrote, or I don't know who knows what he really did with Elden Ring, but
yeah.
He's involved with that in some way too.
How big of a part he had to play and all that. Yeah, it's interesting. And he can't. Obviously, you can't ignore that TV money. He's working on this other TV series and stuff.
Yeah, it's just crazy, man. Like his writing is just falling off completely. Like I know that one of the things he wanted to do, and I'm seeing this here in his bibliography, is just I know he wanted to write a lot of the like supplemental stuff too, like the dictionary or not the encyclopedias and all of that kind of stuff. I know, right, shit. Right. And I think that's kind of what he was focusing on. I think he did a couple of novellas here as well. So who the fuck knows? Yeah. And then there's a reference book and novella collection called Fire and Blood that he released in 2018 about the history of House Targaryen.
Oh,
so I guess he's doing this other shit. I don't know. But,
so he's placating the fans by peppering them with
refusing to finish the 6th book, nonetheless. The
thing
7th.
They really want.
Yeah. So, all right, Dave. Well, let's end every episode, or let's end this episode of Knockback like we do every episode with a dad joke.
All right, here we go. Kyle, a guy walks into a bar, and there's a horse serving drinks. The horse asks, "What are you staring at? Haven't you ever seen a horse tending bar?" The guy says, "It's not that. I just never thought the parrot would sell the place."
Where'd you steal that one from?
I don't know, some really bad dad joke website that I haven't stumbled upon before. There's a lot of them like this, kind of like long. I guess is one long for a very insignificant payoff, which I think is hilarious. Yeah. That's a funny model for a joke, I think.
I agree.
So expect more of these.
Well done. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of all things Knockback. Last Stand Media on Patreon, patreon.com/Last Stand Media for early ad-free access to this show. If you listen to us on iTunes, please leave us nice reviews there. Subscribe to us on YouTube for those of you that like to watch the shows, prefer to listen to it. Most of you listen, but some of you like to watch. Come watch, you
watch, my
weirdos. And we'll see you next time for more Knockback. Until then, goodbye. Knockback, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. Knockback's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including Knockback, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.